Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully a few more people trickle in before we officially get our speakers introduced. So welcome to ViTAL and NUImpact's collaboration event today. Just as a quick introduction for those who don't know much about ViTAL, we are Northeastern's Healthcare Innovation Core. Basically, our mission is to inspire, connect, and create our a very interdisciplinary group of students with more information, more knowledge, and just connections in the healthcare innovation realm. We really emphasize the fact that we are open to students of all backgrounds, and we really just want to make it known that you can be from really any major, any sort of passion and still be able to work within healthcare. And we've done that through the semester with bringing in a bunch of different speakers from the digital health realm who have very different backgrounds, and we're going to continue that today. In the past, in our digital health series, we've had topics such as wearable health, mental health, and data and healthcare. These are just to name a few. Today, we're going to be talking about the intersection of health tech and fintech, and we've invited NUImpact to help us with this because they know much more about the fintech realm than we do. And this is actually one of our last speaker events of the semester and of the year. And our last event will be in 2 weeks actually, and it will be with student entrepreneurs who have put together their own startups and worked in the healthcare realm, which is super cool. So definitely mark your calendars for that, and we'll talk more about the date of that later on. And as always, our events are recorded and they're all available on our YouTube channel. But before we jump into our speaker event, I'm going to pass it off to NUImpact to talk a little bit more about themselves.
Hey, what's up, everyone? First, just want to thank everyone for joining. My name is Varun, and I'm the Director of Investments at NUImpact, which is a student-led impact investing initiative at Northeastern. And basically how the club is organized is it's split into kind of two facets. So one is our educational planning and programming team, which essentially puts on events and brings in speakers with the goal of increasing transparency and the education of impact investing and why it's important. And then the second portion of organization is our actual impact investing fund. And there we deploy flexible capital to early stage, typically seed stage startups that are Boston based and are impact focused. And till date, we've made one investment or in the process of closing our second investment. And typically our check size is between $20,000 and $30,000. But yeah, could you move on to the second slide? So the NUSIS, or our Sustainable Investing Summit, is an event that I think we first hosted 2 years ago. But it's a really cool event where we're bringing in speakers from the impact investing industry to talk about, tailwinds in the industry, where it's headed, and, all that good stuff, ESG investing and industry trends. So if you're interested or passionate about impact investing, creating a positive impact, or are interested in learning more about early stage investing, or just want to learn more about our organization or how you can get involved, would highly, highly recommend checking out NUSIS. And it also just so happens to be the day that our recruitment starts as well for next semester. So if you're interested, please reach out to anyone on NUImpact's team and also check out this event.
So awesome. And first of all, I also want to thank you everyone for tuning in. So before we start, it'd be great if you can just turn on your cameras to keep the conversation more engaging and interacting. So my name is Lynn. I'm a 5th year finance and accounting management student. Currently, I'm leading the venture consulting arm at ViTAL and will be moderating this event with Varun today. So speaking of our themes, which is the intersection of health tech and fintech. I just want to give you a quick background information about this. So access to and affordability of healthcare is increasingly becoming a critical component of Americans' financial lives. If exorbitant prescription drug prices and out-of-pocket expenses were not already enough, healthcare consumers must also navigate payment systems known for their susceptibility to error and obscurity. the relationship between healthcare consumer and their healthcare financing should not have to be so fraught. As health services becoming increasingly digital, more opportunities open up for companies to stage data-driven interventions that can modernize and hopefully revitalize our fragmented healthcare networks. So at the intersection of healthcare and HealthTech and FinTech, for our panel today, we're delighted to welcome Tom and Shankar, who are doing groundbreaking work in the space so as to make healthcare more affordable and accessible. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. Yeah, it'd be great if you can just quickly introduce a bit about yourself, and we can start, diving into the topic. So Tom, do you want to give us a quick introduction about yourself and the ventures that you are involved with?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be here to talk a little bit about healthcare and the intersection of healthcare and fintech. I have spent my whole career working in the payments industry. I got into the healthcare part of payments in 2003. Prior to 2003, I spent the early part of my career working at GE Capital in their payments business, which is now Synchrony Financial. I spent some time at Chase, now JPM, working in their payments business. I then also spent time at Right Express, now known as WEX, another large payments business, and what brought me to currently live in Portland, as well as a couple of other payments organizations. And in 2003, I joined a late stage startup called MBI Benefits, which was focused on linking debit cards to flexible spending accounts, or FSAs, which was the first of the consumer-driven healthcare accounts. That company was acquired and then acquired again, and then spun off and became a company called Allegis Technologies, which I became the founding CEO of and spent several years running that organization. And Allegis Technologies provides the technology that enables all of the different tax advantage benefit accounts, FSAs, HSAs, HRAs. Spent some time running that company, then left and started a Boston-based venture-backed company called Bend Financial. And what we're doing at Bend is building the next generation consumer-driven healthcare or tax advantage benefit accounts. And we launched the company with HSA or health savings accounts, and we plan to move on to the other tax advantage accounts over the next year or so. So that's my background and my experience.
Awesome. And Shankar, do you want to also give us a quick introduction about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting and having me. I am currently the CEO and co-founder of MedZoom. So what MedZoom does is essentially enables a digital engagement platform that combines a lot of rails in consumer engagement, payments, and optimization of benefits in healthcare. Prior to that, so I started out with a technical career overall. Went to tech school, did my electrical engineering in India, and then I moved to Europe, fundamentally doing very large-scale fintech projects. So Europe was kind of going through a lot of flux in terms of systems at that time, because a lot of countries over there adopted the euro, which is the common currency of Europe today. It wasn't like that. So there used to be, Deutsche Marks and French francs and all of that. And I got to build out this system. I was one of the early developers of this system called TCS Banks. And what Banks did was run international securities trading and settlement systems, and basically the whole back office operations of how international trades settle and all that, the custody management around that. Then I moved on to my grad school at UVA, where I went for my master's in systems engineering and focused on a project which was sponsored by the US Navy and DoD. Fundamentally focusing on pattern recognition in the battlefield, right? So AI, the early nascent stages of AI, almost 15 years ago, that kind of led to this interesting intersection of, hey, data and fintech overall, like systems of scale. And I went to Swift and stayed there for 7 odd years, helped them rewrite a system that essentially is the de facto standard for the entire world. It's in 200 countries and almost 15,000, institutions. So Swift is the system that actually processes a lot of financial transactions. Basically, they are the messaging backbone for the world. Did some amazing projects there, and then moved on to do a corporate funded startup in the mortgage space, and that had sort of a social impact paradigm to it. This was right after the housing crash, so we were trying to use predictive modeling to help borrowers stay in their homes. So resolving distressed assets, distressed loans, and doing that in a very systemic manner. So that sort of ended pretty well, and moved on to do MedZoom with a couple of friends of mine. Interestingly, Jeff, who is the founder, and Jeff and I, our kids used to go to the same school, and we would kind of talk about these problems that we see in healthcare, because there is no reason that we pay twice as much as a nation than the next best developed country out there. And that then the journey just continued, and we are finding a lot of traction and getting there.
Thank you both for providing that quick background. Just to set the stage and for our audience, would you both mind like explaining kind of some background info on healthcare benefits and what they are, and those health savings accounts that you were talking about, Tom, and why they may be relevant for just like all of us and everyday people to understand and know about?
Sure. So in the U.S., the benefits landscape is extremely complicated, right? There's a numerous set of benefits that an employer offers to their employees. Typically, there's medical, dental, life insurance, a whole range of benefits. And the real key focus, or the big piece of those benefits, is healthcare or medical benefits. It is typically what an employer spends most of their benefits budget on. Healthcare benefits are very expensive, and consumer-driven healthcare or tax-advantaged benefit accounts, like a flexible spending account, an HSA, or a health savings account, can accompany those medical benefits to help alleviate some of the tax burden that folks have when paying for healthcare. So if you have a flexible spending account, you can put up to several $1,000s into that account. It goes in tax-free. So if you put in $2,000, that $2,000 comes out of your income. It reduces your income by $2,000. You get that tax benefit, and you can use that money to pay for any kind of healthcare expenses that you have. HSAs, or health savings accounts, are similar, but they must be linked to something that's called a high deductible health plan. And that high deductible health plan must have that health plan must have a deductible of a certain amount and have other attributes to it. And if that plan has that, you can have an HSA or a health savings account, which, if you have a family, you can contribute up to $7,200 into that tax-free. If you're individual, you can contribute half of that into that account. And the thing that's really nice about a health savings account is the money that you contribute to it goes in, can grow in investments, and then come out tax-free. So it's a really, really great way to save on the cost of healthcare, and also reduce your tax obligation. Make sense?
Yeah, thanks. Shaka, did you have anything to add to that, or Tom?
No, not much. And I would second, Tom, in terms of the benefits of an HSA. And we are sort of a platform that tries to optimize, benefits to a large extent. We focus on health benefits a lot, and HSAs are essentially triple tax advantaged, right? Okay. So that's the beauty of it. So, personally, I would rather put my money in an HSA before it goes into the 401k, and essentially using that to invest. And a lot of people don't know that, right? So the awareness in terms of not only is it a health savings vehicle, but it's also an investment vehicle. And that's just fabulous. So, I mean, that's the problem with, the system overall, because we have a lot of benefits, and as you get into the workforce and all that, and sometimes the utilization of that is suboptimal. And that is what we try to we are focusing more on the health benefit side today. But how do you really kind of come up with a system that helps you? Because this whole fragmented experience that people have, and it's not a very easy thing to decide on in terms of using benefits in the right way, in the optimal way. And we kind of trying to work towards that.
I think that something that's interesting when you think about the healthcare benefit system in the US, it's really a fascinating process because the way that the healthcare system works in the US is a vestige of World War II. So during World War II, when US employers were trying to recruit people to come work in manufacturing products to support the war effort, there were restraints in things they could not do from a salary and compensation perspective. So one of the things that they did was they offered benefits, healthcare and other benefits. They were tax-free, the employer paid for it. And that system kind of stuck, right? So today, benefits are delivered to individuals primarily through the employer-based system, which came out of World War II. And what basically happens in the healthcare space is that you as a consumer are almost a bystander in the process. You go and you get some healthcare from a provider, whether it's your annual visit to the provider, or whether you had, an emergency room visit, or you have some illness. You go, you get whatever services you get. Then that provider bills your health plan, and the provider and the health plan use a process to kind of determine how much they're going to pay. And when that whole process is done, you as a consumer are now on the hook for whatever the provider and the payer, the health plan, didn't agree to. And so because of that, as a consumer, it is a very broken process. You're at sort of the tail end of the whole thing. And I think, I don't know a ton about your business, Shankar, but I assume that that's part of what you're trying to do, is help people navigate that crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And part of what we are trying to do is also sort of upend that thing a little bit, because the inefficiency that we see, what we have built so far is that we have last mile connectivity to the healthcare customer, because we are primarily an app, right? So we are connected to you on your phone all the time. And we are in the payments rail, we are in the claim stream. So fundamentally what we can do, what we have started doing in terms of our payments enablement products, is that starting to incentivize a certain type of behavior where you go to provider A and not provider B, because we are able to drive efficiency through that provider and get them paid instantly. And those dollars might be able to come, might be coming from an HSA account right away. And it's configured in a way so that it optimizes the whole thing.
Yeah, and I think you're touching on one of the really key points is for those folks who are on the call and don't know a lot about how the process works. You go into a provider's office, we use the term in our industry, provider and doctor, interchangeably. So you go into a provider or doctor's office and you walk in there, you have no idea what you're going to have done to you is going to cost, right? And you leave not knowing that. You might pay a copay when you're in the doctor's office, but you have no idea what the total cost is. And so you go in there, you get done whatever you're having done, and your provider submits a claim through the clearinghouse. The clearinghouse sends the claim to a payer, a health plan, and then the health plan then basically lets the provider or doctor know how much money they're going to get from the health plan, and then eventually the doctor's office bills you for what's left. That process is very crazy. And the actual payment of the funds from you as a consumer is at the very end of that process. And so it's very difficult as a consumer to really understand what's going on. And most folks wait till they get their third bill from the doctor to make sure that all of the payments have been made by the health plan, and then that all that settles out, and then they go ahead and they pay whatever's left. And that process doesn't really benefit anybody, right? That complexity. And it sounds like at MedZoom, you're working to kind of address some of that complexity, facilitate payment.
I mean, we call that sometimes like we want to short circuit all of that and essentially settle up front.
Yeah.
And in no other industry, in no other, aspect of our consumer experience, would you really settle for something where you don't know what you're going to pay unless you've had the service and you wait 3 months to kind of know. Right. And in no other industry does the merchant tolerate so much default and so much inefficiency in terms of getting paid. But
I don't know I haven't looked at the statistics in a while, but it used to be something to the tune of 30% of the receivables, right?
That doesn't come down, and that's gone up. So.
So it's kind of a crazy broken process. And one of the things I would say is that, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I have seen numerous attempts to try to change the whole payment dynamic, and it has been very slow going, right? The method and the system that's in place today has been there for a long time. It is resilient to change, and not that that's good. It's just very well established. So it's been very difficult for there to be, for the kind of change that MedZoom and Bend are trying to make in the industry. It takes a long time to have an impact because there's very established processes, and there's some, there's some vested interest by the players to keep some of the things in place. Probably not I don't know if this is what you wanted us to talk about. We kind of got off onto a start there without really engaging. Apologize for that.
No, that's super interesting. So just like going off all of that, can you speak a little bit more about like some other problems that you see in the industry and where you think businesses can intervene and try to address some of those pain points? Like essentially, like where do you see this industry going in like the next 10, 20 years in terms of businesses growing into it and trying to address these problems?
Yeah. So is it okay, Shanka, if I go first, or would you like to go first?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So a couple of things that I see in the industry. The first is that I think this was commented on in the opening statement, is that healthcare out-of-pocket expense for consumers going up dramatically, right? You know, we're north of $3 trillion spent in the US every year on healthcare, and somewhere between 500 billion and $1 trillion is out-of-pocket expense. What that means that you and I as consumers, that's what our cost is for healthcare, and that number continues to go up, and it's been going up quite a bit since the 2000 timeframe. And what really started to happen in 2000 was that there was this shift that the responsibility for healthcare financial responsibility started to move from employers to individuals. So the premiums that you pay as a employer or consumer to a health plan was going up, your deductible was going up, your copay was going up. So there was this big shift that began to happen. And the logic of that shift was that if we shifted as a country financial responsibility to consumers, we as consumers would make better decisions about our healthcare. So if we were carrying more of that burden, then we might not go and visit the doctor if we don't need to, or we might not get a procedure that we don't need to have done. And that was the underlying logic, and it was called the consumer-driven healthcare movement, or CDH movement, right? One of the problems with that movement was that it's great to say, hey, Tom, you're paying more of your healthcare bill, try to save money. If we go back to what Shanka was saying, where you don't know what you're going to pay when you go to the doctor's office, how can you possibly make informed decisions about that? And so one of the trends that is really, I think, gaining momentum is the transparency concept, which is the ability to know what you're going to pay for a procedure or for healthcare before you go and get that healthcare. So I think that's a really, really important trend in the industry. And there is recently was an executive order coming out of the prior administration to drive transparency and to force hospitals and other organizations to share their pricing so that people could make informed decisions. So I think that's one big trend you're going to see over the next 5 years, is people doing more and more shopping for healthcare, kind of like you might shop for a car or a house or whatever, right? So I think you're going to see some more of that. So I think that's a big trend that I think you're going to see coming up. I also think the conversation we had a few minutes ago about more rapid payment to providers, I think that we're going to see, for a lack of a better term, Venmo-like systems emerge that will make it easy for individuals to pay doctors, and that will happen, super quick. Kind of what you're doing at MedZoom, things like that, I think will become more commonplace over the next 5 or 6 years. It's also likely that what you'll see, I think, happen is today health savings accounts are only available to people that have a high deductible plan that's HSA eligible. I think you will see sometime in the next 5 years where HSAs become more generally available, and anybody who has any type of healthcare coverage in the US would be able to have one. So those are some of the things that I see happening over the next, say 3 to 5 years that will impact how people pay for and the cost of healthcare.
Absolutely, second that. And I think the appetite for more streamlined and modern experiences is there on the consumer side. And I believe the real innovation in healthcare happens on the supply side. there's a lot of groundbreaking work happening in Boston. And where we kind of are failing as a nation is fundamentally at the middle, right? So the delivery layer. So if you think of this as a supply chain, and the appetite for, newer age inventions and care, and just in terms of, we lead the world in terms of newer paradigms of, whatever it's called, a drug or drug discovery or newer modes of treating people. And that's going to happen. And what that will fundamentally do is, how do you really price, how does the pricing model behave, right? So there is a big component of healthcare is the service driven pricing, where procedures are priced. So you go into a hospital. So every market has this goods and services component. So the delivery of the goods, at the end, drugs take up maybe some percentage of the whole healthcare spend portfolio. And we really look at it from a portfolio planning perspective. When we start working with our customers, we say, okay, you have so many employees and you have a portfolio spend on them. And you might have a strategy around optimizing that portfolio. But as we all know, portfolios are enabled by transactions, individual transactions, right? So we go ahead and basically kind of build the platform up so that the transactions start becoming optimal. So each interaction that a consumer is having with the system, if you start optimizing that at that level, fundamentally your portfolio also gets optimized. So that's the approach we are taking, and that has a lot of touch points. So as Tom was saying, payments, right? And we have come up with this paradigm. We have a MedZoom card, like a payment card now. And we collapse that into the phone, and it's a digital payment mechanism. What it helps us, so you carry this plastic card, which is just an insurance card. It identifies you in the system, and it's also an indicator of your eligibility, but it really doesn't have any value other than identifying what price you will pay, and you don't get to know that price when you present that card. So you just get bucketed using that identity and eligibility.
Yeah.
So we want to kind of trigger that up. Now we work with a lot of progressive, smaller health plans who are trying to make a difference. And one of the bigger obstacles that they face was around, I don't know your plan. We take Blue Cross or Aetna. And the way to deal with that was, do you take money? Do you take MasterCard? So, when they see that logo, that barrier goes away. So we have been innovating, like thinking about this at various levels. I was in a call with Vanderbilt University yesterday, and they have this maternity benefit now. Like, you had health benefits, now they're carving out other specialty benefits for local employers and all of that. And in some ways it is getting fragmented, but it's also becoming optimal. So we keep an eye on that and try to have this, we are building out this shelf space, as we call it, on the platform, where we can start plugging in anything that we find to be efficient, and then have an overarching paradigm where we can optimize, through all the options. So that's what we are trying to build. And we are a white label platform. You don't see the MedZoom brand out there. So what you will see is, a healthcare plan brand or an employer brand. And we power those experiences, because fundamentally what consumers see is always a health plan or an employer-based plan experience.
Awesome. So I know that we have been talking a lot about affordability and access in the context of healthcare. So, and also talking about how the company is helping people to maximize the benefits and manage payments. Another topic that I also want to raise is within healthcare, there has been a lot of discussion around health disparities, the level of health access. It varies a lot across different socio-economic backgrounds, and people of with that stuff. So I'm just wondering how do you see your company is addressing this concerns, and how your technology is benefiting people from those different socio-economic backgrounds?
Would you mind going first? I'm having a technical difficulty I need to address, and so I just need to hop off the call for just a couple of seconds. So would you mind going first? I'll be back in like 10
Sure.
seconds. All right, thank you.
So I think, our belief and our experience overall with the platform has been that technology in general can act, in both ways. So it could be a great leveler where it's fundamentally benefiting everybody, leveling the playing field, or it leads to disparities, right? And this is a learning that we had as part of selling this and deploying this and all of that. When we started out, we wanted to kind of go out and sell this to the biggest firms in the West Coast and firms in Boston and all that. Hey, we have this cool platform, the digital mobile first. But where we found success and real appreciation was, blue collar workers in the Midwest. And I will kind of tell you this experience. One of our first customers that launched, like the employer group. So this was a waste management company, and the employees there were primarily dump truck or garbage truck drivers. And they had a lot of problems. Like, they're kind of driving all day. They had injuries and all of that. And all they had as something to access the health system was this plastic card, and they're on the road. So they can't call into a number and have a conversation. So there was really no help. And they were the first ones that said, wow, we really appreciate this. Everybody has a smartphone. And to have a digital platform that enables this for them, that was kind of, something really that kind of took me aback, because I never thought of it that way. That here you have a digital, like the digital platform can really help somebody maybe a little lower on the socioeconomic spectrum. And it becomes such a great level playing field, because, that guy is not working in front of a PC or a Mac all day. He's on the road, but he obviously he or she has access to a smartphone. And that's the reality of the world today. So that's how we kind of focused more on the mobile first strategy and trying to bring it down to a mobile platform first.
So with our company, if you look at the HSA, the health savings account industry, the industry talks in terms of three personas. It typically talks of a spender, a saver, and investor. Remember what Shankar said earlier about how a HSA is a triple tax advantage product and a great way to save for the future. Some people use HSAs to do that, to invest and save their money for future times. Some people spend their funds today on current healthcare. Some people are in the middle. But at our company, we identified a fourth type of persona that we call a non-funder. And that is somebody that is in a high deductible plan and has an HSA, but because of their economic situation, they don't fund the account. They don't put any money in. And so because the way that the account has been presented historically is at the beginning of the year, set up your contributions to your HSA, and then you just let it go. And for some people, setting up that contribution and just letting it go, they don't have that disposable income to do that, right? It's, for them to even put aside $50 a month into their HSA account, that's difficult. So we built our product with features and capabilities that makes it very easy for folks to do sort of one-time instant contributions to their account. So let's say that they had an unexpected doctor's visit, or they had an unexpected emergency room visit, or they had an unexpected medication needs. They just quickly pass money through their HSA account, get the tax benefit, then put the money right back into their own personal account. And so we built a whole set of features to facilitate that, which was targeted towards folks who didn't really have the financial resources, the discretionary income to set aside money every month and just, kind of set it and forget it. So we built a whole set of features towards that non-funder persona. And that's what we did to help folks from that sort of that economic strata that you're talking about.
Awesome. I think that's like a great, answer to my question. And since I'm also so I'm very interested in healthcare, but I also major in finance. So a lot of time I usually look at the problems that the healthcare industry is facing right now, and how that compare to, other problems that the financial industry faced in the past. So, the lack of healthcare access and inclusion is really reminiscent of the issues raised around the lack of financial inclusion in these, in the US in the early 2000s. So, I just wondering, so what lessons do you think could health tech learn from fintech experience in order to democratize access and affordability to healthcare, going forward?
One of the really cool innovations in fintech for folks that were who were at lower economic strata happened around the time you're talking about, around the turn of the century into 2000. And it was the introduction of retail reloadable prepaid cards. I know that's a long explanation and a long name, but essentially folks who were at the lower end of the economic strata did not have access to card-based transactions. So they didn't have a bank account because they were unbanked, and they couldn't get a credit card because they didn't have any credit. So the world was switching to electronic transactions. And as the world switched to electronic transactions, if you did not have the economic status, if you were unbanked or whatever, to have a card at your disposal, you were getting left behind. And so an innovation that came about was retail reloadable prepaid cards. So it was a debit card, but it was prepaid. So you would go to a Western Union, for example, or some retail location, you would put money on that prepaid card. You might put $100 or $200 or whatever you have available, and then you could use that card to go execute a transaction that could only be done electronically. So for example, online shopping, or maybe you were booking a flight and you had to pay with a card. And so that, to me, was one of the most important innovations that really helped people who were underserved by the financial markets to really get involved and engaged in the space. So I think that, innovations that kind of match that in healthcare would be really cool. And it sounds like some of the stuff that Shenka is doing at MedZoom might start to do some of those things to help people get engaged in the system. What we're doing, I don't mean to dismiss what we're doing at our company, but it won't have that kind of an impact that we're just talking about, right? We're not going to fundamentally change the payment system with my company, but those are the kinds of things that you would want to see, similar to what we just talked about, that was that was very impactful to sort of that lower strata, economic strata, 20 years ago. Did that make sense? That was a long answer.
No, I think that's a great answer. Shenka, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think, we have this. So when we look at healthcare today, we sort of look at it and sort of come to this conclusion that there is market failure in, healthcare today. So, and what do we really mean by that? And if you have looked at industries that have been impacted by, so when we talk about fintech today, right, we are talking about consumer facing financial services that are enabled via apps. That's the modern paradigm. When you talk about, fintech platform, say Robinhood, people are trading on, their mobile phones. It's fundamentally the ease of access to a transaction, right? And the other thing that it does is fundamentally trickle up pricing transparency. So let's take retail, or, if you take travel. And I don't know if you guys have ever had experience when you were younger that there used to be this thing called a travel agent, at least in India, when we were growing up.
Yeah.
And the pricing was opaque. You call up somebody and they would, get back to you and say, yeah, this is the best price. And that has whittled away. So what happens is basically the information discrepancy that you see, between the demand and supply sides, what transactional systems and fintech systems today enable is that kind of goes away, right? So that enables a fundamentally efficient transaction. And that is what we are after. So, and what is the natural byproduct of that? Generally, it's a marketplace where, consumers have real-time visibility, or even if not real-time, at least near real-time or some semblance of real-time, where prices sort of reflect, the demand supply mechanics of goods and services, and you can trade on that. And that has happened in retail. If you look at the Amazon.com experience and everything that has happened after Amazon, and that has happened in retail. That had happened in retail with the invention of the supermarket in the US, right? When I grew up in India, there was nothing like this. I couldn't walk into a store like Walmart, and they had physical shelves. It's almost like the Amazon experience where you get to see everything in the world. And yeah, and somebody who has not been outside of the US really doesn't appreciate how much of a wonderful experience that is. Because my first experience with that supermarket was in Athens, Greece. I went to this Carrefour retail store on the outskirts of Athens, and that was mind-blowing because you could see basically the entire supply side and the associated pricing with it, and that suddenly becomes so hard for you to decide on. That creates another problem. Okay, what do I buy now? So first of all, we have to get access to the information, and we are kind of trying to obviously trickle up information. So with access to information, what happens is decision making becomes the second problem, and we are trying to go after that as well. So fundamentally, a marketplace paradigm where we help consumers, healthcare consumers, or healthcare customers, which might be your employer or university, help you optimize that experience. So information and optimization based on that data is something that we are after.
One of the interesting challenges in what you're talking about in the healthcare space is that folks who are from lower economic strata typically, not always, but a lot of times, they don't have health insurance, right? And without health insurance, it's literally impossible to cost effectively access the system, right? Because one of the things that health insurance does for you is it changes the list price. Even if you are, right, even if you are, you go and you get coverage and go and get something done and you haven't reached your deductible and you have to pay for it, your price as a member of your health plan might be $200 for that service. If you walk in off the street, that service might cost you $500. So somebody who is kind of at an economic strata where they, or a situation where they can't currently have health coverage, their cost of healthcare is astronomically higher. And so as the world moves more to this retail experience that Chakra is talking about, then you will start to see people be able to get better healthcare, because it will be more of a market driven than sort of the artificial situation we have today. I think that's at least 5 years away, maybe more, but some people that I work with and interact with in the industry think that it's coming sooner than that. And one of the things that they point to is some of the mergers that are going on. So CVS and Aetna combining together, right, is a recognition that Aetna, which is a traditional health plan, and CVS retail health, that's beginning to happen. Walmart entering into the experience of providing healthcare at their stores also starts to talk to that. And I think some of the moves that Amazon's making talks to that as well. But I do think you will eventually be in a scenario that I think Chakra's describing, where it's going to be more of a retail healthcare delivery, and that will make it much more sort of, it will democratize it, right? It will make it more available and it will be more ubiquitous to everybody. But I think that is, again, probably 5+ years away before it's broadly like that, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are working towards that. And, the segment that you're talking about. So, and healthcare pricing is, it's sort of perverse. Sometimes, you walk in with an insurance card and the price can go up if you
Right.
pay, otherwise if you pay cash and say that I'll just pay cash and it's cheaper
Right.
for you. And we try to optimize those experiences also, where there might be a cash paying network in the MedZoom platform. It's sort of an add-on, but you access that and you get cheaper prices because of the MedZoom payment card. So yeah, it's a lot of dimensions. I think optimization is fundamentally about, your choices along various dimensions. And it's not easy. I don't think, it gets solved next year, as Tom is saying.
For sure. Yeah. The interesting thing too is today's conference is kind of described as payments. And payments is kind of the very last step in the process. There's all this other stuff that goes on before the money moves, right? And that, to me, the actual movement of the money is not where the innovation is going to happen. The innovation is the stuff that leads up to the money movement. How do you engage with consumers? How do you engage with the providers? How does all that come together in a way that the data moves quicker, that people understand what they're paying fast? All that kind of stuff happens quickly, and then the money moves at the back end, and the actual money movement is a little bit unexciting. And even though I've worked in payments my whole life, it's not about the money movement, it's about the data and what you do with the data and how you make money move as a result of the data. So I think you will start to see those things change over these next, 5 to 10 years.
Awesome. Thank you both for answering some of the questions that Lynn and I had. Just in the interest of time, I also wanted to open it up to the audience. So if anyone has any questions, like feel free to unmute and ask them, or alternatively, you can also ask them in the chat. Okay, so we have one from Shashank who says, there's a lot of buzz around healthcare blockchain for a variety of applications. Do you foresee healthcare blockchains significantly mitigating rising costs? And will that be carried over to the consumer?
As you said, there is a lot of buzz. Now, what is the business problem that a blockchain can really solve is something that we need to think about. A blockchain, in a sense, is a distributed ledger, right? So if you have a distributed ledger, you need parties to sort of converge around that. And one of the bigger problems in healthcare that, at least I've seen so far is getting people to agree on standards. And the fragmentation really doesn't suddenly go away. The technology has its promise. I surely believe that, a blockchain solution as a viable technology alternative will have its place someday. But we need an overarching paradigm to sort of drive adoption of that standard or whatever comes through. So that unless you have participants on a blockchain, it's really of no use.
I don't have anything meaningful to add to what has been said.
I also had a quick question, and thank you so much for everything that you've been talking about so far. It's been really informative. How do you see, I'm currently in this healthcare class that talks about healthcare policy and welfare. So we've been talking a lot about Medicare for all and single payer plan systems. Yeah. How do you see that kind of playing into everything that we've been discussing today? Or what are your takes on it?
So I participate in a lobbying organization called the HSA Council, which is part of the American Bankers Association. And what the HSA Council does is they participate in all sorts of activities to try to advance the interests of our industry. And so through that, we get a lot of access to information about what's going on in the administration and what bills are being moved through Congress. And from that experience, here is what I hear on an ongoing basis in these meetings. It is the opinion of this group is that it is unlikely that a full single payer system will really move forward in the US because it would require broad support across the country, and it doesn't really have that broad support. It has profound economic impact on the country because so much of the economy is built around the established system that we have, the payer provider system. So it would be extremely disruptive. So I think a broad move to single payer where all of us are now covered under single payer system is a very unlikely situation. So, kind of Medicare for all, what I hear, and this is not my personal opinion, this is on the data that I'm hearing from these meetings I participate in, that it is unlikely that a Medicare for all would move forward. What I do hear as being more likely is Medicare for more, right? Where you would expand the number of folks that are covered by Medicare to include perhaps dropping the age a little bit, or perhaps expanding it to other groups of folks. And so what you hear is that is more likely. And so I do believe that is something that may come to pass over the next 4 years. But there is very strong political divide on this topic, right? And given that while the left side of the aisle controls the House and the White House, with the Senate being so split down the middle, it is highly unlikely that you are going to see much movement over the next couple of years with any of these things. I think what's more likely to happen is what we see happening now, which is expansion of the Affordable Care Act to maybe make some changes that expand the Affordable Care Act, I think is more likely. If it does come to pass, it is very disruptive. From a public policy perspective, it would be nice if every American was covered by healthcare. But from an economic perspective, it is a complex thing to execute, and it's also very contentious politically. So kind of an interesting, discussion.
Yeah, I think I would, mostly second Tom's thoughts there. Healthcare is $4 trillion. If you think about our national economy and that being such a big portion of what the entire GDP is, it's going to be really very disruptive to sort of suddenly impose a Medicare for all kind of a. But I think, politically and socially, we are kind of heading in a direction where universal coverage, and that is, I think, at some point going to happen. I don't know whether in the next 4 years or not, like generally access to healthcare for everybody. And whether the delivery model for that is through a public mechanism or a private mechanism, that really doesn't matter. But, as long as somebody has the fiscal means to support that, and a public option might happen, as Tom was saying, where you sort of Medicare expands and more people get to buy into Medicare if they want to. That's what my thought process. And I'm not so much of a policy expert overall, but that's
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So as this meeting's kind of coming to a close, I just wanted to end off the Q&A with one final question. So, on this Zoom call, or whoever tunes in afterwards to watch the recording, it's a group of students who are interested in fintech, health tech, and whatnot. And, Tom and Shanka, you have this whole career of experience in this space. So, final question, if you could say, give one piece of advice or say one thing that you think that these students should take away from this meeting, in terms of like continuing on their career or pursuing something after college, what would that be?
Shanka, would you like to go first? Nothing immediately pops to mind for me.
Yeah, I think if I were to kind of put myself in your shoes and try to think about, what do I need to do? So it's fundamentally in every field today, all aspects of business, data-driven decision-making and building systems around data, that's becoming more and more common, right? So for the last 20 years, where system building and software engineering and all of that sort of ruled the world, right? In terms of getting to a point where software is eating the world today. And that's going to happen with data and AI and, models in general. So that's the next evolution. So if you can invest some time in terms of basic skill building in data and AI, that's going to help you overall.
And the only thing I would add is that both fintech and health tech are two very exciting, fast-moving industries, and I think that that there are many great careers that you could find in either one of those spaces. And it's been, for me, fantastic having worked in both, and I've both done well personally and professionally by being in these industries. So I couldn't advocate more for them. I think you would find a rewarding career in either one. So I would definitely keep your options open in either industry.
And what you're doing is already kind of setting the template. So the world is going to be more and more interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
And, you guys have latched onto it already. So I kind of have your eyes and ears open and kind of try to optimize across experiences as and when you find them.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Alrighty, so thank you again to both Tom and Shanka. We really, really appreciate you guys coming and hearing more about your insights. And thank you to our moderators, you guys. We're awesome, and thank you so much for facilitating our conversation. Really quickly, just to wrap up, I just wanted to highlight our healthcare the Husky Health Innovation Challenge, which is our healthcare case competition. So we have our finalists, and this Saturday, March 27th, from 9 to 2, we're going to be hosting our pitch day. From 9 to 12, if you want to join and want to hear the finalists' pitches to the judges, you're more than welcome to join us. And if you're interested more in networking with our sponsors, and you'll see those on the next slide, that'll be happening from 12 to 2. You'll be able to network with our sponsors as well as other people attending the finalists and our club as well. So definitely save your spot, and we'll also be sending this link in the chat as well. And you'll be able to find it in our Slack and also our newsletters and our social medias. So we have many wonderful sponsors, which includes AARP Innovation Labs, Accenture, Johnson & Johnson, Trinity Life Sciences, and a lot of Northeastern schools. And also MeHi, it was covered. But again, thank you so much to our speakers for coming today. We do still have 2 more events this semester. So the pitch day this Saturday, and an HHIC sponsored student entrepreneur panel, which, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be students who started their own healthcare businesses and startups, one of which still actually attends Northeastern and is part of our Slack, and some others that are from outside of Northeastern, but have also started very young in terms of creating their own healthcare company. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, please let us know. Stay behind. If you have anything to ask about HHIC, we're also recruiting for our next year's eBoard right now. And I know we talked a lot about that last week. If you're interested in applying, the Google link to that is in our Instagram link tree, as well as on our social medias everywhere else as well. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. And thank you, NUImpact, for being a great collaborator. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you guys so much. That was so